The training hall of the Zyran Coalition was built to intimidate. The ceiling was high, the walls were made of dark metal, and strange symbols glowed faintly along the floor. This was the place where weaker species learned fear. Every race that entered this hall understood one truth very quickly: survival depended on obedience. Instructor Crawl stood at the center of the chamber. He was tall even by Zyran standards, his armored skin marked with old scars earned through countless dominance trials. His voice alone had caused entire groups of trainees to freeze in terror. He had trained predators, warriors, and killers from across the galaxy. No one had ever challenged him. Today's class was different. For the first time, a human was present. The human stood among the other trainees, smaller than most, unarmored and strangely relaxed. His posture was casual, almost careless. His hands rested at his sides, and his eyes moved slowly across the room, not with fear but curiosity. To Crawl, this was already an insult. Crawl's mandibles clicked in irritation. Humans were new to the coalition. Recently discovered, recently tested. Their physical strength was unimpressive, their bodies fragile, their skin soft. By all biological standards, they should have been weak. Yet rumors followed them, whispers of impossible endurance. Stories of humans surviving toxins, wounds, and environments that killed others in seconds. Crawl dismissed most of it as exaggeration. Every species told stories to inflate its own importance. He raised one clawed hand and the room fell silent. "Today," Crawl said, his voice echoing through the chamber, "you will witness true biological superiority." A low hum filled the air as a sealed container rose from the floor. Inside it was a transparent sphere glowing faintly with green light. The trainees shifted nervously. Many recognized it instantly. Venom, not just any venom. This was Zithek's extract, harvested from one of the deadliest creatures ever recorded. One drop could stop 3 hearts. 2 drops could dissolve neural tissue. Entire planets had been quarantined because of it. Fear spread through the room like a living thing. Crawl watched with satisfaction as several trainees stepped back. One species curled into a defensive posture. Another released stress pheromones. Then he looked at the human. The human did not move. Crawl narrowed his eyes. "This venom," Crawl continued, "has ended wars, it has erased bloodlines. Even the strongest among you would last seconds." He activated the field slightly. The venom shimmered, pulsing softly as if alive. Several trainees whimpered. The human tilted his head. Crawl felt irritation again. He stepped closer, towering over the human. "Human," Crawl said sharply, "explain your lack of reaction." The human looked up at him, his face was calm, his eyes showed no fear. If anything, they showed interest. "It's just green," the human said slowly. A few trainees gasped. Speaking during a demonstration without permission was unheard of. Crawl's claws tightened. "Do you question my authority?" Crawl demanded. The human shook his head. "No, sir, just trying to understand." "Understand what?" "How dangerous it really is." A ripple of tension passed through the room. Crawl felt something unfamiliar, uncertainty. He crushed it instantly. "You doubt the deadliest venom known?" Crawl asked. The human paused, then shrugged slightly. "I mean, I've seen worse." Silence fell like a blade. Crawl stared at the human. For a moment he wondered if the translator had failed. He checked his display. It had not. "You claim experience with superior toxins." Crawl said coldly. "Not superior," the human replied. "Just different." That was when it happened. The human laughed. It was not loud. It was not aggressive. It was a short, sharp sound, filled with disbelief rather than mockery. But it hit the room harder than any weapon. Every trainee froze. Crawl froze. The sound echoed in the vast chamber, unnatural and wrong. Laughter did not belong here. Fear belonged here. Submission belonged here. Crawl felt his dominance fracture for the first time in centuries. "You find this amusing?" Crawl said, his voice dangerously low. The human covered his mouth quickly. "Sorry. I didn't mean to be rude." "Explain," Crawl demanded. The human looked at the venom again. His expression shifted, becoming thoughtful. "Back on my planet," the human said, "we have animals that use venom too. Some are weak. Some are strong, some kill fast, some kill slow." Crawl said nothing. "But the scary ones," the human continued, "aren't always the strongest. They're the ones that hurt for a long time." Several trainees leaned closer, confused despite their fear. "This stuff," the human said, pointing at the container, "looks like it shuts things down fast. Nervous system, heart, clean." Crawl felt anger flare. "You analyze death like a scholar." The human nodded. "We had to." "Why?" Crawl asked. The human met his gaze, because our world is full of things that want us dead. The room grew heavier. Crawl had seen Deathworld species before. None spoke like this. You are claiming your planet is more dangerous than the Zithek's hunting grounds? Crawl asked. The human thought for a moment. Not more dangerous, just more patient. Crawl felt something tighten in his core. Demonstrations require proof, Crawl said. Words are meaningless. He adjusted the controls. The venom field weakened further. A few trainees cried out in panic. Crawl turned to the human. You will observe closer. The human did not step back. Crawl watched carefully now, every movement, every breath. Your species fears nothing? Crawl asked. The human smiled faintly. Oh, we fear plenty. Then why laugh? Because fear doesn't always look the same, the human replied. The venom pulsed brighter. Crawl felt the balance of the room shift. The trainees were no longer watching the venom. They were watching the human. That was unacceptable. You will learn respect, Crawl said, or you will be removed. The human nodded slowly. Fair enough. But his eyes never left the venom, and for the first time in his long career, Instructor Crawl realized something was deeply wrong. This was not a weak species being tested. This was something else, something that had evolved alongside pain, something that had learned to smile at death. And the training hall, once a place of absolute control, now felt strangely smaller. Instructor Crawl did not like silence. Silence meant uncertainty, and uncertainty meant weakness. The training hall remained quiet long after the human finished speaking. The venom container continued to glow softly, casting green reflections on the metal walls. Several alien trainees stood frozen, their instincts screaming danger. Yet the human stood still, breathing evenly, his expression calm. Crawl straightened his posture. He would not allow this moment to define him. Enough talk, Crawl said. You will observe how fear is born. He turned to one of the trainees, a thin-scaled creature from a water world. Its species was known for quick reflexes but weak resistance to toxins. The creature trembled as Crawl pointed at it. Step forward. The trainee hesitated, then obeyed. Its eyes never left the venom. This demonstration is controlled, Crawl said loudly, more for the room than for the trainee. You will feel only a fraction of its power. The field adjusted again. A tiny release of vapor escaped the container, barely visible. The effect was immediate. The trainee gasped, collapsing to its knees. Its limbs twitched as panic took over. Its breathing became fast and shallow. Fear filled the room again, thick and familiar. Relief washed through Crawl. This was how it should be. Observe, Crawl said. This is instinct. This is survival. The other trainees watched in terror. The human watched quietly. Crawl noticed it and felt irritation return. Human, Crawl said. What do you see? The human looked at the trainee, then at the venom. His face showed concern but not fear. He's panicking, the human said. His body is making it worse. Crawl's eyes narrowed. Explain. When you're scared, the human continued, your heart speeds up. Blood moves faster, so the toxin spreads faster. Some trainees looked confused, others looked thoughtful. Crawl felt something twist in his chest. You claim knowledge of toxin behavior. The human nodded. Basic survival stuff. Crawl waved a claw and the venom field strengthened again. The trainee stopped convulsing, breathing slowly as recovery systems activated. Med drones moved in to assist. You survived, Crawl said to the trainee, because I allowed it. The trainee bowed weakly. Crawl turned back to the human. Your species speaks too freely for one so fragile. The human did not react to the insult. We learned to speak up, he said, or we didn't live long. Crawl circled him slowly. Your bones break easily, Crawl said. Your skin offers no armor, your senses are limited. Yet you stand here without fear. I'm afraid, the human replied. Crawl stopped. You show no signs, because fear isn't always screaming, the human said. Sometimes it's quiet. The room felt heavier again. Crawl turned to the control panel. Then let us test quiet fear. He selected a different setting. A sharper warning tone echoed through the hall. Several trainees cried out. This level, Crawl announced, has never been applied to an unarmored species. The venom glowed brighter. The human-'s breathing changed slightly. Crawl noticed it pleased him. You will step closer, Crawl ordered. The human obeyed. Step by step, he moved toward the container. The heat of the field shimmered in the air. Even the strongest trainees backed away. Stop, one trainee whispered in fear. The human stopped just short of the barrier. The venom pulsed. Sweat appeared on the human's forehead. His jaw tightened. Crawl leaned forward. There, that is fear. The human exhaled slowly. No, he said, that's focus. Crawl activated the release. The venom vapor filled the immediate space around the human. Invisible, lethal. Several trainees screamed. Crawl watched closely, ready to end it the moment the human collapsed. Seconds passed. The human swayed slightly, then steadied himself. His hands clenched into fists. His face tightened, not in panic but effort. Crawl's confidence wavered. "Impossible," he muttered. The human's heart rate spiked, then slowed. His breathing became controlled, deep, measured. "What is he doing?" A trainee whispered. "He's controlling himself," another replied, stunned. The venom should have shut him down. It did not. The human took a step back on his own. Crawl deactivated the field instantly. The room exploded into noise, fear. Confusion, shock. The human bent slightly, hands on his knees, catching his breath. Then he straightened. "I wouldn't recommend that dose again," he said calmly. "It's rough." Crawl stared at him. "You survived exposure," Crawl said slowly. "Unassisted?" "Not unassisted," the human replied. "My body helped." "How?" Crawl demanded. The human wiped sweat from his face. "Adrenaline, stress hormones, faster liver response. We evolved with poisons everywhere." "Lies," Crawl said, but his voice lacked strength. The human looked around the room. "Your venom kills fast," he said. "Ours usually doesn't. It hurts longer, teaches you lessons." Crawl felt something cold crawl up his spine. "You design pain?" Crawl asked. "No," the human said. "Nature did." The trainees were no longer afraid of the venom. They were afraid of the human. Crawl saw it clearly now. Their eyes followed the human's movements. Their instincts recalculated. Authority was slipping. "You will return to formation," Crawl snapped. The trainees obeyed, but slowly. Crawl faced the human one last time. "You will be reported." The human nodded. "Fair." "But understand this," Crawl said. "You are not dominant here." The human met his gaze. "We never said we were." That answer disturbed Crawl more than defiance ever could. As the session ended, the trainees filed out in silence. The venom container descended back into the floor. Crawl remained alone in the hall. For the first time, he reviewed the human's file again. Deathworld classification, extreme adaptability, psychological resilience flagged as unknown. Crawl closed the file. Unknown was dangerous, and for the first time in his long life, Instructor Crawl felt something he had not trained others to feel. Concern. The next cycle, the training hall felt different. It was not the lights or the walls. It was the attention. More instructors were present now. Senior observers stood along the upper platforms, their armored bodies still and silent. Symbols of command glowed on their chests. The coalition had noticed. Instructor Crawl stood at his position, his posture perfect, his expression controlled. Inside, his thoughts were not. The human entered last. The room reacted instantly. Several trainees shifted away without thinking. Others watched him carefully, measuring distance, escape paths, and threat. No one laughed. No one spoke. The human noticed but said nothing. He took his place calmly. Crawl raised his voice. "Today's session will continue." One of the senior observers leaned forward slightly. "Explain yesterday's anomaly." Crawl stiffened. "A controlled exposure test revealed unexpected resistance." "Unexpected," the observer repeated. "Yes," Crawl replied. The human endured venom exposure beyond predicted limits. The observer's eyes moved to the human. "Human, step forward." The human obeyed. "State your designation," the observer said. "Daniel," the human replied. "Your species should not survive Zithek's exposure," the observer said. "Explain." Daniel paused. "We're not designed to survive it. We just don't shut down easily." The observer's eyes narrowed. "Biology does not function on stubbornness." Daniel gave a small smile. "Ours kind of does." Murmurs spread across the platform. The observer gestured. "Instructor Crawl, proceed." Crawl swallowed his irritation and activated a new display. This one showed human anatomy, bones. "Organs, systems. Human biology is inefficient," Crawl said. "Redundant systems, excessive pain response, emotional interference." Daniel watched the display quietly. "But these inefficiencies," Crawl continued, "create resilience." One observer tilted its head. "Explain." Crawl hesitated, then spoke honestly. "Humans do not rely on perfection, they rely on recovery." The room fell silent. Daniel nodded slightly. Crawl continued. "Damage that would incapacitate other species only slows humans. Their bodies compensate, their minds adapt." The observer looked at Daniel. "Adapt to what?" Daniel answered calmly. "Pain, loss, fear." The word fear echoed. "You fear constantly?" the observer asked. "Yes," Daniel said. "We just learned to work with it." The observer turned to the trainees. "This species originates from a death world." Several trainees stiffened. A world where nature itself is hostile, the observer continued. Predators, toxins, disease, environmental instability. Daniel looked at the floor briefly. You evolved under constant threat, the observer said. Yes, Daniel replied. Then your laughter, the observer said slowly, was not mockery. No, Daniel said, it was recognition. Crawl felt a strange chill. The observer folded its limbs. Recognition of what? Daniel looked up. That your venom wasn't trying to scare me, it was trying to kill me. Silence spread again, and killing, Daniel continued, is something we've faced our whole history. One of the trainees whispered, they live like this. Crawl heard it. The observer studied Daniel carefully. Your species should be extinct. Daniel shrugged. We almost were, a lot. The observer turned to Crawl. Demonstrate human tolerance, controlled, non-lethal. Crawl's mandibles tightened. With respect, command, further exposure may. This is an order, the observer said. Crawl bowed. Understood. The training floor shifted. A new apparatus rose from the ground, smaller than the venom container but more complex. Sensors attached themselves to Daniel's arms and chest. Daniel looked at Crawl. What is it? Stress simulation, Crawl said. Chemical, sensory, and psychological. Daniel nodded. All right. Several trainees backed away. The observer's voice echoed. Begin. The room darkened. Sounds filled the air. Alarms, screams, distorted visuals flashed across the walls. Chemical agents flooded the space, triggering panic responses. Daniel stiffened. His breathing quickened. His heart rate spiked. Crawl watched closely. Daniel's fists clenched. Sweat formed. His face tightened as pain signals surged. This is breaking him, one trainee whispered. Then Daniel did something unexpected. He slowed his breathing. In. Out, his shoulders relaxed slightly. His stance stabilized. What is he doing? The observer asked. Crawl answered quietly. Grounding. The stress levels increased. Daniel groaned softly but did not collapse. Inside his mind, memories surfaced. Fire, sirens, broken structures, loss. His jaw tightened. No, he whispered. The observers leaned closer. Daniel's breathing steadied again. I'm here, he said softly. The stress simulation reached levels that had incapacitated combat species before. Daniel dropped to one knee. Gasps filled the room, then he pushed himself back up. Impossible, a trainee whispered. Daniel's eyes opened fully now. Focused, sharp. The simulation ended abruptly. Silence returned. Daniel stood there, shaking slightly but standing. Crawl stared. The observer said nothing for a long moment. Then, endurance confirmed. The trainees looked at Daniel with something new now, respect, fear mixed with understanding. You teach fear, Daniel said quietly, looking at Crawl. We grow up inside it. Crawl felt his authority shift again, but this time it was not loss, it was transformation. You are not warriors, Crawl said slowly, addressing the trainees. You are survivors. Daniel looked at him, surprised. The observer straightened. This changes things. How? Crawl asked. Humans are not threats through force, the observer said. They are threats through persistence. The observer looked at Daniel. Your species will be studied. Daniel nodded. We're used to that. The observer turned away. Class dismissed. As the trainees left, many glanced back at Daniel. None laughed. None whispered. Crawl remained behind again. He approached Daniel slowly. You embarrassed me, Crawl said. Daniel met his gaze. I didn't mean to. I know, Crawl replied. Crawl paused. You survived because you refused to give in. Daniel nodded. That's kind of our thing. Crawl exhaled slowly. This facility was built to break spirits, Crawl said. You bent it instead. Daniel gave a tired smile. We bend before we break. Crawl watched the human leave. For the first time, he did not feel concern. He felt something more dangerous, expectation. The training facility did not sleep. Even during rest cycles, the walls hummed softly with power, and sensors tracked every movement. Instructor Crawl stood alone in the observation chamber, watching recorded data scroll across the screen. Heart rates, stress curves, recovery times. The human's data did not make sense. His system spiked harder than most species, yet recovered faster. Pain responses were extreme, yet temporary. Fear signals surged, then stabilized. It was chaos balanced by control. Crawl closed the display. Outside the chamber, the human sat alone on a bench, staring at the distant stars through a reinforced window. He looked small against the vastness of space. Crawl hesitated, then he stepped out. You should be resting, Crawl said. Daniel did not turn. Sleep doesn't come easy after that. Crawl studied him. The simulation was designed to break mental structures. Daniel nodded. It was good. Crawl blinked. Good, Daniel shrugged. Felt familiar. That word again. Crawl sat at a careful distance. You did not panic when the memories surfaced. Daniel exhaled slowly. I just didn't let it win. Crawl tilted his head. Your memories were not fabricated. No, Daniel said quietly. They were real. Crawl waited. Daniel spoke after a moment. My city was hit when I was young. Chemical attack, fires, people screaming. We learned fast how to survive. Crawl felt something tighten. You were exposed to toxins as juveniles. Daniel nodded. We didn't have a choice. Silence stretched. Crawl broke it. Your species allows such suffering? Daniel turned to him. Our species causes it. Crawl absorbed that, and yet you continue. Because stopping would mean giving up, Daniel said. Crawl looked back through the window. Stars burned cold and distant. Other trainees fear you, Crawl said. Daniel smiled faintly. I noticed. That was not your intention? No, Daniel said. I just didn't want them to think fear is weakness. Crawl considered this. Fear is the foundation of control. Daniel shook his head. Fear is information. What you do with it matters. Crawl said nothing. The next cycle training resumed. The hall filled again, but the energy had changed. The trainees grouped differently now. Some stood closer to Daniel. Others kept their distance, watching carefully. Crawl took his position. Today, he said, we test cooperation under threat. The observers watched silently from above. A simulated environmental failure triggered. The floor trembled. Warning lights flashed. Atmospheric pressure dropped. Several trainees panicked. Daniel moved instantly. Stay low, he said calmly. Slow breathing, follow me. His voice cut through the noise. Some trainees hesitated. One slipped and fell. Daniel grabbed them, pulling them upright. Crawl watched closely. Daniel was not asserting dominance. He was stabilizing the group. The simulation intensified. Heat surged. Toxic markers appeared on the displays. Filters failing, a trainee cried. Daniel scanned the room. Seal that vent, now. Another trainee obeyed without thinking. Crawl felt something shift inside him. The trainees were responding to the human, not because they feared him, because they trusted him. The simulation ended. The hall returned to normal. Breathing slowly, the trainees looked at one another in disbelief. They had succeeded. Crawl addressed them. What allowed survival? One trainee spoke hesitantly. Coordination. Another added leadership. All eyes moved to Daniel. Daniel looked uncomfortable. I just did what made sense. The observer leaned forward. Explain, Daniel shrugged. When things go wrong, someone has to stay calm. Panic spreads fast. Your species trains for disaster, the observer asked. Daniel nodded. We expect it. Crawl felt cold understanding settle in. Humans did not train for ideal conditions. They trained for failure. Later in the recovery area, trainees gathered near Daniel. Questions followed, quiet ones. Does it ever stop hurting? One asked. Daniel shook his head. You get better at carrying it. Another asked, why didn't you run? Daniel answered simply. Someone had to help. Crawl watched from a distance. For the first time, the facility's purpose felt wrong. That cycle, the observers met privately. Human influence is spreading, one said. Not through force, another replied. Through example. This is dangerous, a third said. They change structures. Crawl listened silently. They destabilize hierarchy, an observer said. Crawl finally spoke. They strengthen survival. The room went quiet. You defend them, the observer asked. I state facts, Crawl replied. The observer studied him. Careful, instructor. Crawl bowed his head slightly. After the meeting, Crawl approached Daniel again. You are altering the trainees, Crawl said. Daniel frowned. Is that bad? For this system? Crawl said, yes, for survival. Daniel asked. Crawl paused. No. Daniel nodded. A warning signal echoed suddenly. Real, not simulated. Red lights filled the facility. All units report, a voice called over the system. External breach detected. Crawl's blood ran cold. This was not training. This was real. The trainees froze. Daniel looked at Crawl. What kind of breach? Crawl checked the display. His mandibles tightened. Unknown hostile entities, Crawl said. Boarding in progress. Fear returned to the room. Alarms screamed through the facility. The calm order of the training hall shattered instantly. Red lights flashed across the walls, painting every face with urgency. The sound of metal grinding echoed through distant corridors. This was not a drill. Instructor Crawl moved first. All trainees form defensive clusters, he ordered. Some obeyed, some froze. Daniel scanned the room, his mind already shifting. Training halls, panic, noise. It all felt too familiar. How many attackers? Daniel asked. Unknown, Crawl replied. Sensors show multiple boarding points. Then they planned this, Daniel said. The doors at the far end buckled inward. A sharp explosion ripped through the corridor beyond. Screams echoed. The trainees panicked. Daniel raised his voice, not loud but clear. Eyes on me, breathe slow. Some trainees looked at him automatically. Crawl noticed. Move, Daniel said. We don't wait. The doors burst open. Figures rushed in, tall. Armored, their weapons glowed with unstable energy. These were not pirates. Their movements were precise, purposeful, hostiles. Crawl reacted instantly, activating defense fields. Energy bolts slammed into the shields. They know our layout, Crawl said. Daniel watched their movement. They're testing response time. A trainee collapsed, overwhelmed by fear. Daniel pulled them behind cover. Stay down, follow my count. The attackers advanced methodically. Crawl felt anger flare. This was his domain. Hold the line, he commanded. The trainees fired back with training weapons, weak, ineffective. The attackers pushed forward. Daniel watched one fall briefly, then rise again. Those weapons won't stop them, Daniel said. What do you suggest? Crawl snapped. Daniel scanned the environment. You built this place to scare people. Yes, Crawl said. Then use it, Daniel replied. Crawl hesitated. Daniel pointed to the venom containment systems embedded in the floor. Your toxins. Crawl's eyes widened. That could kill everyone. Only if you panic, Daniel said. The attackers breached the inner line. A blast struck near Daniel. He was thrown back hard into the wall. Pain exploded through his side. Crawl saw it. Human. Daniel groaned, forcing himself up. Blood darkened his uniform. Still here, he said through clenched teeth. The trainees stared in shock. He should have been down. He was. Crawl made a decision. He rerouted the venom systems. The air shifted. A faint chemical presence filled the hall. The attackers slowed. Confusion rippled through their formation. Different biology, Daniel said. It hits them harder. One attacker staggered. Another dropped. The trainees stared. Fear turned into awe. The attackers adjusted, activating internal filters. They adapt fast, Daniel warned. The attackers pushed again. Daniel grabbed a fallen weapon. It was heavy, unfamiliar. He tested it once. Then he moved, not with strength, with intent. He struck when they overextended, pulled one attacker into cover, disabled another by targeting joints. Pain flared with every movement. Daniel ignored it. Crawl watched in disbelief. This was not rage. This was control. The attackers began to retreat slightly, recalculating. Crawl reinforced the toxin field carefully. The hall became a maze of danger. Daniel guided the trainees through it. Left, now stay close. They followed. One trainee stumbled. Daniel lifted them without slowing. How are you still moving? The trainee whispered. Daniel answered without looking back. Because stopping hurts more. A sudden blast hit nearby. Daniel went down again. This time he stayed down for a second longer. Crawl felt fear spike. Daniel pushed himself up, breathing hard. His vision blurred. Don't, Crawl said. You will die. Daniel shook his head. Not yet. The attackers made one final push. Crawl prepared to overload the systems. Daniel looked at him. If you do that, they'll adapt next time. What choice do we have? Crawl asked. Daniel looked at the attackers, then at the trainees. Let me end it. Crawl hesitated, then he trusted him. Daniel stepped into the open. The attackers aimed at him. Daniel raised his hands slightly. You came for control, he said loudly. You won't find it here. They fired, the shots hit. Daniel staggered, pain tore through him. He did not fall, he kept walking. The attackers froze, that moment broke them. Fear rippled through their ranks. They turned and retreated. Emergency barriers slammed shut behind them. Silence followed. The hall was wrecked. Smoke filled the air. Daniel finally collapsed. Crawl rushed to him. He's alive, a med drone reported. Severe injuries, stable. Crawl let out a breath he did not realize he was holding. The trainees gathered around, shaken, silent. They had survived. Because of the human. As Daniel was carried away, one trainee whispered, he laughed at venom. Another replied softly, he doesn't laugh at danger. He lives with it. Crawl watched them go. The facility still stood, but everything had changed, and the coalition would not ignore this. The medical wing was silent except for the steady hum of machines. Daniel lay unconscious on the recovery platform, his body wrapped in healing fields. Burns marked his skin. Fractures were sealed but not yet healed. His heart rate was slow but steady. Instructor Crawl stood beside the platform. He had not moved for a long time. The door opened behind him. The observers entered. Their presence filled the room with pressure. The human survived, one said. Yes, Crawl replied, barely. He should not have, another observer said. Crawl turned. Many things happened that should not have. The observers studied Daniel's readings. He interfered with command structure, altered trainee behavior, engaged hostiles without authorization. He saved the facility, Crawl said. At unacceptable cost, an observer replied. The cost would have been extinction, Crawl said calmly. Silence followed. The attackers retreated, the lead observer said. They will report. Good, Crawl replied. Let them. The observer's eyes narrowed. You defend this human too strongly. I defend survival, Crawl said. Another observer spoke. The council has ordered an inquiry. Crawl's mandibles tightened. A trial. A judgment, the observer corrected, on the human's presence in coalition space. Crawl looked at Daniel. He did not choose to be here. His species chose to join, the observer said, and brought instability with them. The observers turned to leave. Prepare him, one said, when he wakes. Hours later, Daniel opened his eyes. Pain greeted him instantly. He groaned softly. You are awake, Crawl said. Daniel turned his head slightly. That's unfortunate. Crawl almost smiled. You survived, Crawl said again. Daniel swallowed. Everyone else. Alive, Crawl replied, because of you. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Good. There is a problem, Crawl said. Daniel opened one eye. There always is. The council will judge you, Crawl said. Daniel was quiet for a moment. For what? For changing things, Crawl replied. Daniel exhaled slowly. Figures. The next cycle, Daniel was escorted into the council chamber. The room was vast and cold. Layers of platforms rose into darkness. Representatives of dozens of species watched in silence. Daniel walked unassisted, though every step hurt. Crawl followed behind him. Human Daniel, a voice echoed. You stand accused of destabilizing coalition doctrine. Daniel looked up. I didn't know you had one. Murmurs spread. Silence, the voice commanded. You interfered with command hierarchy. You altered training outcomes. You engaged hostiles independently. Yes, Daniel said simply. You admit this, the voice asked. Yes, Daniel replied. Why? The council demanded. Daniel looked around the chamber. Because people were about to die. That is not your decision, the voice said. Daniel nodded. On my world it usually is. The room shifted uneasily. You introduced dangerous variables, the council said. Your species resists fear conditioning. You undermine control. Daniel tilted his head. You build systems that break when fear fails. Crawl felt tension spike. You challenge us. The council asked. No, Daniel said. I'm explaining. Explain, the council demanded. Daniel took a breath. Pain flared. He ignored it. You train soldiers to obey fear, Daniel said. That works until fear isn't enough. Until something worse shows up. The council remained silent. You want stability, Daniel continued. But you design fragile systems, one shock and everything falls apart. That is incorrect, the council replied. The attack proved otherwise, Daniel said. A ripple passed through the chamber. You survived what others could not, the council said. Why? Daniel thought for a moment. Because we expect things to go wrong. You embrace chaos? The council asked. No, Daniel replied. We plan for it. The council paused. Your species is unpredictable, one representative said. Yes, Daniel agreed. So is the universe. Silence stretched. You laughed at Venom, another voice said. Why? Daniel looked down, then back up. Because it wasn't personal. The council did not understand. When something tries to kill us, Daniel continued, we don't always see it as evil. Sometimes it's just nature doing what it does. You do not fear death? The council asked. Daniel's voice softened. We fear it deeply. Then why laugh? The council pressed. Daniel met their gaze. Because sometimes laughter is the only thing that keeps fear from owning you. The chamber was still. You are dangerous, the council said. Daniel nodded. Yes. Crawl stiffened. But not in the way you think, Daniel added. The council spoke quietly among themselves. Minutes passed. Finally, the lead voice returned. Human Daniel, the council said. Your actions violated protocol, yet your presence prevented greater loss. Daniel waited. You will not be punished, the council continued. But you will not be allowed to continue as before. Daniel frowned slightly, meaning. You will not be trained, the council said. You will teach. The chamber reacted instantly. Teach, Daniel repeated. You will instruct our instructors, the council said, in survival under failure. Daniel looked back at Crawl. Crawl's eyes widened. You will show us, the council said, how fear is endured instead of obeyed. Daniel was silent for a long moment, then he nodded. All right. But understand this, the council warned. If your influence spreads too far. Daniel met their gaze calmly. It already has. The council dismissed him. As Daniel left the chamber, Krall walked beside him. You changed the coalition, Krall said quietly. Daniel shook his head. No, I just showed cracks. Krall stopped. You will be watched, Krall said. Daniel smiled faintly. We always are. Krall watched the human walk away. He realized then that the coalition had not judged humanity. It had just accepted it, and the real consequences were still coming. The training facility changed slowly, not in its walls or systems, but in its people. Daniel stood at the center of the hall again, but this time he was not alone. Instructors stood beside him. Observers watched quietly. Trainees filled the space not with fear but attention. Instructor Krall watched from the side. He no longer stood above. He stood among. Daniel's body still carried scars from the attack. Some pain never fully left, but he stood straight, calm, steady. Today, Daniel said, we don't train to win. The trainees shifted, confused. We train to survive when winning isn't possible. Krall felt the weight of those words. Daniel activated a simulation. Systems failed instantly. Lights flickered, pressure dropped. Noise filled the hall, some trainees tensed. Daniel raised one hand. Breathe. They did. The chaos continued. Fear tells you something is wrong, Daniel said calmly. That's useful. Panic tells you nothing. That's deadly. The trainees moved together, slower than before. Smarter, they adapted. Krall watched something incredible. They did not freeze, they adjusted. The simulation ended. The room remained quiet. One trainee spoke. We didn't follow orders. Daniel nodded. You followed reality. The trainee looked uncertain. Is that allowed? Daniel smiled faintly. It has to be. Above them, the observers watched in silence. One turned to another. They are changing. Yes, the other replied, and it works. Days passed, reports spread across the coalition. Training failures dropped. Survival rates increased. Units exposed to humans performed better under stress. Not because they feared more, because they broke less. Krall read the reports late into the cycle. He remembered the first day the human laughed. He understood now. It was not disrespect, it was perspective. The coalition called it adaptation. Humans called it living. One cycle, Daniel stood again before the council. This time he was not summoned. He was invited. You have altered doctrine, the council said. Daniel nodded. It needed it. You were correct, the council admitted. Fear-based control collapses under extreme pressure. Daniel said nothing. You taught endurance, the council continued. Not dominance, not obedience. Daniel met their gaze. Those don't last. The council paused. Humanity will be classified differently, they said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. How? Not as a threat species, the council replied. Not as a warrior species. Daniel waited. As a persistent species. The chamber shifted. A species that does not break, the council continued. That adapts endlessly, that survives without superiority. Daniel smiled softly. Sounds about right. The council leaned forward. But understand this, your influence frightens others. Daniel nodded. Change usually does. You will be asked to leave some systems, the council said. Daniel's smile faded slightly. I figured, but the council added, you will be welcomed in others. Daniel looked surprised. You are not conquerors, the council said. You are stabilizers. Daniel thought about his home, about Earth, about history. Sometimes, he said quietly, we forget that ourselves. The council dismissed him. As Daniel walked through the facility one last time, trainees stopped.